Indeed.
All right, I think this is what we got for folks.
No, we're just going.
So,
Yeah, really. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
My usual seat.
Oh, he's talking about the usual seat of the house.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's my.
You sure can. All right, well, I think this is who we're gonna have. Thanks for coming out on this beautiful day. We should all be out in the country instead. And thank the planning commission for joining us tonight on three subjects. The property maintenance code, permits, sales tax exemption, and building codes. I do have some information in our packet, and I assume that planning commission got it as well online. And that being the first section here on the IEMC. So who wants to talk about this? Dave?
I guess I could talk about it. Basically, I would like to have this as a tool. And there's certain sections that I would want and certain sections I think we need. It's not something that I'm gonna use every day. If something comes up, like a renter or something has a complaint, bring it to City Hall and stuff, this kind of gives me a backbone that I have something to go into. So when I contact stuff. Right now, we really don't have anything anymore. You have someone that might not be, might not like the landlord for some reason and just a complaint type thing. So this way, if someone brings in a complaint and stuff, then we can go with this, and then we can go down and go through the scope on like chapter and stuff like that and see where we need to go from that.
Doesn't the state have landlord-tenant regulations as to habitability and all that kind of stuff?
I would have to check. But if someone wants me to condemn a building or whatever, how do I go about doing that? This would help me do that.
Yeah, even regardless of any state statutes, he's got no authority to enact the state statute.
Right.
I think the landlord agreement absence of the landlord only is meant to be between the relationship between the landlord and the tenant, not between a building official and a city
Right. Right, but if it's violated, then there's.
Something that goes between that other relationship.
Yeah, why? I'm just curious what the underlying reason is. I mean, what's the problem we're trying to fix?
You're trying to obtain compliance with your building codes that you've enacted for the purposes of protecting the public health and safety.
We've given the city official a body of knowledge with which to base his interactions between the property owner and the city. Without that, you're living in the wind without a toolbox.
So I had a property owner come to me and say, condemn my property. How can I go about doing that if I don't have something like this? This came from a property owner. I went through this thing, but I didn't condemn his building because we don't have this tool.
Right.
So I went through this code and kind of typed him up a letter and said you need to fix it, fix that, and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't condemn it because I couldn't. I didn't have anything that says I can can condemn it.
But currently, in order to condemn a building, we do what?
Basically, it'd be a abatement.
There's no condemning. There's no condemning.
We order an abatement, yeah.
You guys get to do that.
I'm just, I just don't
Condemning is
wanna,
also for insurance purposes. That's why
Yeah.
people want that letter.
right, I'm just reluctant to add on a level of regulations if there's not a problem that needs to be addressed. I mean, I went through this, and my house would fail pretty miserably on a lot of sections in here. And I think pretty much, I'm just pulling a number out of the air, probably 70 or 80% of the structures in town would be in violation of something in here.
But I wouldn't be using it as a daily tool. I would only be using it as a tool if something came up.
So I think that's kind of the rub, I think, is that, so then you're the kind of the arbitrator who's gonna, when you're gonna apply this and that and
Right.
other. And I think really maybe the best thing to do is, instead of having the all-encompassing global packet right there, why don't you pick out the ones that we really need?
I did.
Okay, and then put that together and say, this is what I want. Instead of saying, I want this big thick document, say, these are the items that I want, that we need to have to do this.
Right.
So
So,
then there's, that's something that these guys can act.
So go ahead,
Specifically.
I'll
so basically, I want to adopt chapter 1. I want to adopt chapter 2, that's the definitions. And then chapter 3, I want to adopt section 301. And then this has been brought up about motor vehicles. You guys wanted to adopt section 302.8. There's something that might be able to help on some of those issues.
Right-of-way issues.
Section 304, I would like to adopt. Section 305. Section 306. Chapter 4, I don't need that because that's in the IRC. Chapter 5, section 501. Section 502. Section 503. Section 505, Section 506, Chapter 6, Section 601, 602, Section 603, Section 604, Chapter 7, Section 701, and Section 702. And there's Appendix A that just really don't need, that just tells you how you should bring it up and stuff. But those are the ones I would like.
so we wouldn't regulate lawns and.
No. See, I mean,
Well, exactly, I mean, yeah.
but it's not one of those things that I'm gonna, every day, I'm gonna spend 2 hours taking a drive around town. That's not what I'm doing.
Right, but I mean, once the regulation's in place, you're not necessarily always going to be the building inspector, so, we get some new gung ho guy.
You guys put it down for the same reason you're talking about. And it's a recurring theme now. And it's a need. And you're denying an employee tools in his toolbox for
I think the
personal
reason it was
reasons.
turned down the last time was that it was seen as a issue where there was a lot of arbitrary stuff in it, and that basically I don't like my neighbor, so I'm going to raise a stink about it, and then all of a sudden, these things are applying. So I mean, it's creating a mechanism for folks to, I guess, fight with each other and have somebody else out there, I guess, being the bad guy for what is a neighbor dispute. And that was one of
how do you, so what tools does he have to deal with the neighbor dispute? Or do you have any suggestions for him besides this? Because this is the body that every other municipality uses for that situation across the country.
Well, I guess, first of all, what's the process to determine whether the complaint is a valid one, or it's,
There is a complaint process in place that already does that.
okay. So this may not even apply to them because the complaint would be handled, in a different form?
No, the complaints end up dead a lot of times because we don't have this in order to resolve them. I think you're missing the point.
I think, go ahead, Glenn. Open discussion here.
Dave and I had a lengthy discussion about this this morning, this afternoon. You know, and I recognize, and we were both talking about how this, if done improperly, can be weaponized almost.
Mhm.
Typically, communities, as a process, start adopting the IPMC code, International Maintenance Code. And what they do is they say, we're going to only enforce these chapters because they can pick and choose. You don't have to pick everything. The second thing is, the third thing is that basically an understanding that the building inspector does not go out there with blinders on if he is getting a call for enforcement. That if your neighbor is doing that, you're going to look at the neighbor's yard because I've been in too many communities where I've seen exactly what I'm hearing from some of the council about the challenges of seeing something that could be looked at as beneficial to some looked at as not beneficial, others seeing as a way to get even with their neighbors because their neighbors don't keep their yard as neat as they keep their yards. It's really trying to find that balance. And maybe, because I'm hearing everything that's being said, is maybe if Dave has only wants these sections, that we just bring these, reduced sections that you can look at it from that perspective and then say, okay, we like this, but we don't like this.
Well, I'd like it a lot better if it only applied to commercial spaces. And included in commercial, I would say, is the business of renting. So, rental properties and commercial buildings, but not owner occupied.
What would be the purpose of that?
The whole home is my castle concept.
Well, like you say,
Some of that.
well, like you're saying, under this current code, large portion of Nome would not comply.
I don't like
Nome's
the
not the only
concept of,
place that has that problem.
right, well, I don't like the concept of somebody coming into my house and checking to make sure that my ceiling
You're missing the
fans are
point.
working in my
Why would
bathroom.
I be coming into your house?
I don't know, why would we
Why
have
would-
Why
something
would I
that we're
drive
not gonna
around and
enforce?
say, oh, Gerald, I'm here to go into your house? I'm not gonna do that. That's not what this is for.
Really, this is for the relationship between the city official and the property owner who has a problem with another property owner. Not to come in your house and poke your paranoia.
Well, then why do we have anything that's internal in here, that's internal to the house?
Because half the power outlets in my kitchen don't work, but I have power in my kitchen, so
So
it's all
how do
fine.
you hold your commercial property landlord accountable if, for that kind of situation, if you don't adopt something like this?
Anything below a fourplex is residential.
Fourplex is residential. Fiveplex is not.
Is that where you're kind of seeing a lot of the potential violations? Is that-
Right, and most of it, like this property, the property owner is a fourplex. And he wanted me to do something, and there was nothing really I could do. There was another complaint that came in when the Census Bureau people came in, and they went to a property, and they fell through someone's stairs. Now that's an issue.
Yeah.
Was it a residential or was it commercial? But it's a safety issue, and that's kind of what it's here for. But I'm not gonna go say to Mark's house and say, oh, your step is broke, you need to change. I don't have time to do that. That's not what this is for. That's not why I want it adopted. I want it adopted when I get a complaint from somebody that says, hey, I just fell off this landing because there's no handrail. That's 36 inches above. You know, anything 30 inches and higher is supposed to have a handrail. Well, if someone's going on someone's property and falls off, that should be an issue that we should acknowledge, because then it's going to protect them after it, not after, once it happens, but it's a way of fixing the problem, and then the safety issue is fixed. But I'm not going to go looking at everybody's property and say, all right, here's a whole list, you need to fix that. That's not what this is for.
So the other scenario, one of the scenarios we had when I was building this building, the fire department couldn't get access to a building because it had too much stuff around it. And the neighboring stuff and all that. And that was a minor fire, thank God, didn't get out of control. And they asked me to go over and see if I could get them to clear pathways for their access and to get to the meter grids, because they're not gonna put a hose on a building without a meter. So now you're against safety in the community by not adopting this.
Okay, so I guess, not having read every single piece of this, but a couple of examples that just were used seem to me to be sections we're not going to adopt. We're not recommended. Handrails 307, maybe I just didn't write it down. And then garbage and rubbish 308 would seem to be the thing outside. And those were left out.
Well, the handrail stuff is going to be under IRC.
It was just,
So some of this stuff is in the IRC.
And that's
But a lot of stuff is
international residential code.
IRC, we already have adopted as a code for the city, or?
yes,
Well, we have, but it's not.
one time.
So that's
But I mean, it's just something. If something happens, if someone gets injured or something, and they can say, "Hey, I was over here and such and such, and I fix this," you know, not make them get a building permit, but fix it so it's safe for them to use and other people to come in. But that gives me a tool to go there and look at it and say, "Oh, yes, they should fix that."
Yeah, and he did recommend John to stand corrected, section 704 fire protection systems, which specifically relates to the example here.
I guess I missed it. We got 701, 702.
Yeah, I didn't get 704.
704 would be enough.
Mm-hmm.
What code is it that allows you to, when you're determining a building inhabitable, I guess?
I mean,
This-
habitable.
Uninhabitable?
This is the code.
This would be the start of it,
How do we do it already? 'Cause
the abatement process.
Which is when it's already falling down. Pretty bad.
No, it's when the number of abatements, we take it off abatements because people cured the issues.
You
to
may
make
still
them
have
non-
the same, you still have the same option. It doesn't go away.
I'm saying, all I wonder is, are we duplicating aside from something we already have that we're not using?
I think this is a tool that we could probably use before going to the abatement process. The abatement process is,
Those other rules are only pertaining to abatement, not to normal, like you get a complaint about rental property that has issues because it's unsafe, because of what you've got those complaints. And you go there and you say you need to fix this, this, and this. How do you, what do you use to do that other than common sense?
basically I'm gonna use this and then I'm gonna use the IRC.
You got
The-
No, I mean, you've already used it, I think that you've already had those situations come up, now all I'm asking, I'm not against doing this.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out that we don't duplicate things. But you already have some tools, because I know people make complaints use some code that we already have.
Use IRC, I can't go inspect it unless they get a building permit. This allows me to go inspect it.
Without a building permit.
So the IRC is only for new construction?
New and remodel.
Okay.
This is
But I'm not allowed to go inspect anything unless there's a permit on it.
unless he's invited,
Right.
unless you're invited.
Can a tenant invite, or does it gotta be the landlord?
Not be a property owner.
For inspection on new construction?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't do the reconstruction unless you have a building permit.
Right.
Inspection.
So, you know, if somebody's just complaining about, whatever the issue is in that place.
Right, but I
6 months or whatever.
I get, what I'm questioning is the statement that we can't inspect a building that's under a building permit without being invited to do so.
The building
That's
has a permit obtained for it, yes, they can. But that's when they've already chosen to fix something that they plan to fix. If the tenant is just complaining about, I've had a water leak under my kitchen sink for 18 months, and the landlord's just letting it go, he's got no legs to go into the building and say, yeah, you definitely need to fix that, it's a safety thing.
Right, so they would go to Alaska Legal Services and file a lawsuit under the landlord-tenant stuff, wouldn't they?
No, you're not getting the point at all. Landlord tenant is between the landlord and the tenant. not
Right,
the
but
city
the
and
enforcement-
city official.
Right,
Right,
the
there's no
enforcement
enforcement.
goes through the court.
They don't go together.
Right. And what I'm saying is you don't necessarily need the city involved in a landlord-tenant dispute if there's another law that already covers it that can be adjudicated.
You're gonna bring the landlord tenant dispute to the door and complain. We're talking about city complaints, not a landlord tenant dispute.
But the city doesn't have to get involved in every single dispute.
No, but the
But
city
they,
can't.
you need some tools that assist in the process, which you're denying.
See, the city can't get involved in a dispute if a tenant has an
Which is
issue
more
that
of
the
a basis for a
landlord's not.
lawsuit. You're not giving them the tools, which is more of a basis for a lawsuit if you wanna get technical. That's the lawyer for the city.
Okay, so looking at, chapter 5.30 with nuisances, and, it goes into hearings and abatement, process. Describes what a health, fire, and public nuisance, is. I guess it seems like, I mean, what is the, what is the process if somebody disagrees with this? How are they heard?
Through the abatement process?
No, if this
So
was
the same,
adopted.
so it's the same thing, so the Board of Adjudication for any of those complaints that already exists is in place, that it's supposed to be from you guys. And the planning
And
commission.
that's what happens.
That's already in
Right,
place. That's
so,
already
so
in
if
code
this thing
law.
was adopted, it would be the same
It would
thing.
be under the same,
So somebody had an issue with an overzealous, building inspector that was going on my property and doing stuff, they could come and city council and say, feel like they're overstepping.
I like your point about the process and the abatement, because the abatement process, it's too late. It's already done. It really has nothing to do with.
Well, I'm just thinking of how
complaints.
most, a lot of those properties that were abated in last go around were not, end up not being abated because they end up getting fixed. There are basically maintenance issues that caused a unsafe situation, condition that somebody complained about. I mean, most of them, I don't think you were, your predecessors, they were looking for one at this point because a complaint came in from neighbors about it being an unsafe condition.
We did get like 5 or 6 taken down.
Took it down.
Yeah, but the bar is set way higher for that.
Right.
With
let's
this,
get-
it gets-
let's review it. How many's been on the abatement list for how many years? How successful is that process? It should be just terminated. That one should be gone. I mean, it really doesn't work. It's a waste of taxpayers' money, waste of time. And in the end, all those properties that got abated are through compliance with the owner. They consented and they joined the process. Anybody who didn't want it, it didn't work anyways because there's no teeth in it. This has some teeth.
You took them down without the owner's consent. I know that.
Maybe one, when it was a real safety issue.
You got one off because they sold
We have to show that. And, I've been watching them for quite a while on a planning commission.
And somebody bought it.
It's a lot of.
But in any case, it's not a matter of we need to tear down a bunch of buildings. If a building's a problem and you catch it in a triage phase, and you can actually fix it and make it habitable, then it resolves some of the biggest complaint that was in that city survey. What 90 some odd percent of towns said that there's not enough housing here. Well, if you fix houses that are uninhabitable, make it so somebody can live there, then it gets better. If you adopt certain provisions of this, and like you say, 70% of town or something like that, I think is what you said. 70% of houses have flagrant violations on here. Okay, well you start chipping away at a few of those. I'm not saying that everybody has to do everything on the list to get a perfect 100% score, but you make it look a little bit nicer every year, a little bit nicer, and then the next thing you know.
Well, it sounds like we eliminate most of the most onerous sections anyways.
And there's currently in town, there's infestations of bed bugs that are pretty hot and wild. And there's a number of landlords that refuse to have them treated. And without something like this, when the complaints come in, there's nothing to stand on. And I could get you some exterminators' testimony if you like. There's a couple of hot spots that keep sending them around town, and the landlords are refusing to do anything about it. And with the housing crisis, people can't move. So you're really hampering the city system by not adopting it. And hampering the ability of its citizens to have some recourse.
I guess I'm not trying to be, I don't know what the word is, but I guess making sure that whatever we do actually addresses the issue, and it seems like pests, does that fall, bugs fall in some?
Infestation is in there.
Right, but you're not adopting that, 309 is not.
Well, he didn't put that forward. I was going to suggest to put that forward, put it on the list, because it is a current issue in town right now. I can get you as much testimony as you like. I can have him come to the podium at your next city council meeting and speak about it.
Maybe Fox might fall in the same category.
What's that?
Fox.
Fox,
Maybe another
infestation. People don't want to get them removed from under their houses.
Most of those are tenants, are they not able to go to the tenant landlord act, or how come?
Doesn't apply. It just applies to your lease term agreement. That's what a landlord tenant applies to. It's like, it's a lease in lieu of a lease.
Is there like
All
a
it
secure
addresses
unhealthy
the tenant.
situation?
No, it doesn't address any of it. Zero. It's just where there's no lease in place, it's actually a lease. It basically pertains to conditions of a lease. That's all it is. It prescribes things like 2 months from date of when the person waives to return their deposit for security. That's the kind of thing it outlines specifically.
The Landlord and Tenant Act provides the landlord must make all repairs and do whatever is necessary to put and keep the premises in a fit and habitable condition, keep all common areas of the premises in clean and safe condition, maintain in good and safe working order and condition all electrical, plumbing, sanitary, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, kitchen, and other facilities and appliances, including elevators supplied or required to be supplied by the landlord. Provide, maintain appropriate receptacles and conveniences for the removal of ashes, garbage, rubbish, etc. Supply running running water, locks, keys, smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. Examples of typical duties that fall under these provisions include the landlord's duty to maintain doors, windows, roofs, floors, walls, and ceilings, ensuring that they do not leak or have holes. Plumbing that works does not leak. Working safe stove and oven, reliable heating system, safe electrical wiring system, windows or fans that provide fresh air, and it goes on and on.
Check it out.
Terms of the lease, this is
All
basically.
the boxes that he just mentioned.
Mhm.
Terms of the lease and what the landlord has to do.
It goes
Yeah,
way
but
beyond.
that's a
Yeah,
law,
yeah,
that's a,
yeah,
law-
that's
that's a
what the
law,
has to
that's
do.
a law
Yeah.
though.
Right, and that's a law, so
That's a law, but.
if they're in violation,
We're not
the
talking about.
Those are all facilities.
Right, that's between the landlord and the tenant.
well, that's what this is facilities.
It's between the landlord and the tenant, again, not the city official. and-
But the city doesn't need to get involved in a dispute like that, it's between
No,
the
we're not
the
looking to get
landlord and
involved in
the,
that. Nobody's looking to get involved in that. We're looking to have tools in the toolbox for Dave or any city code official to have to write a letter and to address things and they don't have now.
And if we're saying it's a law, so we're gonna use the law, like, you want me to call the police when the power goes out of my house?
Yeah, who do you call?
you sue the,
That's
sue the
not-
landlord,
that's not a law.
basically, is how you,
You just read it. The power goes out. I'm not talking the whole city, I'm talking just my house.
right.
If the power goes out next door, the landlord-tenant agreement says that I have to have power, so I'm gonna call the police because he's breaking the law now.
No, it's a civil
It's the
suit,
city
it's a
price.
civil issue, it's not a criminal issue. It's a civil enforcement. So it's through the courts.
The city's just gonna let that landlord until they go to court.
That's what's going on now. It's not effective. It doesn't work. It isn't addressing it for what this thing needs to do.
If you look at the definition of what they consider to be within the city of Nome as being an appropriate health and safety, it would be one that matches the local building codes, I'm sure. Well, any argument about whether or not a particular building meets the building codes is gonna be refereed not by the state, but by a city official. So this is the tool to see whether or not this.
It's a state
The
law.
paranoid is not gonna
Well,
apply
sure.
evenly, and somebody's gonna get harmed. Is there a paranoia that somebody's gonna get harmed and not apply?
No, I just don't think, I'm just trying to figure out why it's necessary.
It's necessary.
I mean, you can say that, you're convinced it's necessary. And I'm convinced that you're convinced that it's necessary, okay? I'm not convinced it is necessary. That's why I'm asking all these questions. I mean, so far, the examples that have been given are things that there's already remedies out there that can be used. I mean, the whole landlord-tenant thing is, I mean, that's in law. And no, you can't call the police, but you can't call the police on this thing
You can't call,
either.
you can't call the police, but you can't wait, 11 months to go through the court process to eventually get things,
Until the,
hopefully addressed.
It's gonna take that long if you've got this. Also, if the owner doesn't agree, your enforcement, you don't have enforcement here. You can assess fines.
Right, you can assess
Not have enforcement because we haven't adopted this, and then once you adopt this and
$100
sections and
fine.
stuff, and then you fine the people until they fix it.
Yeah, if somebody comes in and complains that, there's a water leak in my kitchen or whatever it is, and my landlord won't deal with it, if there's some kind of problem that's egregious and going to cause larger problems and affects their quality of life, even if it's something that's addressed by the landlord-tenant act, it's not gonna be, 11 months to go through the court process.
Well, let's
and
not
clogging
let
up the court system.
let's let the landlord tenant act take care of it. Let's lead a blind dog. Let's get sued because we're not.
But if somebody
You're gonna get
complains,
sued just as easy if you don't enforce that
This is
thing.
an international code, so.
Even.
It is under, it's not something you can sue because it's an international
Except you're picking on me because you're assessing me fines where I can show that, you know, all the neighbors on my street have the same issue and you haven't fined them.
There wasn't a complaint put in.
Was there a complaint?
Yeah.
Or did I just drive by and say,
That
unless I
doesn't,
get a complaint, I'm not using this. I don't understand what you're,
Paranoia's gotta go.
we're not going in your house to inspect anything.
When you do have a complaint, you just want something.
I want something that I
You can,
have something to go by.
Write a letter, try to resolve the situation.
Cause if,
I haven't written a fine to anybody since I've been building inspector. That's not my intent.
No.
I've written letters before I have done that.
Mhm.
But I don't want this so I can go to everybody's house and say, oh, this and this and this. I got more things to do than this. This is just something that I can use when something happens.
Without naming names, give some real life examples of what this would result.
We've been-
Like I said, I had a property owner that wanted me to condemn his house.
Only because he doesn't want to put the money into working upon it. It's the one I'm thinking
But
of.
he had no water and sewer, his water and sewer pipes were broke. There was people living in poor apartments. I mean,
That's a limb.
I mean,
so he wanted an excuse to kick out his tenants. And he wanted the city to be the bad guy to do that.
And have the insurance company buy him a new building.
Right.
right, but I mean, it was unsafe for those people there, and it was unsafe for us as residents of Nome to have the sewage going directly on the ground.
Branches agree with that.
So, I mean, that helps. This would help that. Instead of saying, all right, we're gonna abate this, we're just gonna tear it down.
Wait.
Well, is that the really way you wanna
Stuff on
go?
the ground in the meantime, because we're waiting for landlord tenant act to kick in.
Right. Which can take even longer than 11 months.
There's no
I
representative
mean,
to go to. for-
Really, cases can be dragged out for a long time.
File a lawsuit, basically.
I mean,
Yeah, They ain't got money for that.
We go back to that census
And you're
person
you're
that
allowed, you're allowed.
walked up on the steps and fell through the steps and stuff. Yeah, we got that complaint, but there was nothing we can do.
Mhm.
So is this, were you involved with the, what do you call it? Closing down of a home that people can't stay in because it was unsanitary this winter?
Yes.
If we had this in place, would it have given you tools if you knew about it earlier to remedy that situation before it got to be where it got to, basically?
Yeah.
That was
Because someone complained about it, and it's like,
At the moment, there's no real formal process for dealing with the complaints. Other than just one at a time based on how everybody's feeling, because there's no guidelines. So,
Okay, so I wonder if maybe some of the, stuff that's being asked about is under the scope and administration thing, because this is setting up a whole new, it looks like, Board of Appeals.
adapted to the current city.
Yeah, it's already in. it's
Process is
already
already in place.
You're the board of appeals.
That's kind of like Glenn's idea of the staff go back and basically pull out what they're interested in having with their planning commission. The planning commission for that. And then we can take a look at it then. And then maybe not, maybe
Gerald's
won't,
at that meeting with you guys too.
maybe it won't be so overwhelming. Because it's,
Well, not to, just, have lawyers for, they, not to have the clock running on the thing or the
No,
cash
sure.
register going.
I agree.
But, I mean, it seems like, melding together what we already have, to ensure that we're not, that there aren't discrepancies in that, tying in, addressing or making sure that the thing is addressed, or that is addressed, the thing about it, not being an arbitrary process. That should somewhere be stated, I would think. The process for hearing and, when the Landlord-Tenant Act may trump something that is in this or some other clause. I don't think all this stuff is bad, but it's, I guess, to get over some of the concerns or questions on ensuring that the process is necessary and is fair. So I think the attorney should participate in that.
I'm also curious whether, because, I mean, we're gonna have public hearing when we pass the ordinance that adopts this. People are gonna come in and ask questions and, I mean, have you guys had, public input? I mean, have you put this out to the public that we're talking about in adopting this or anything?
It was put out the last time when I put it for the public meeting. We didn't really get a response.
Mhm.
Good. I don't know about this time.
No, certainly this has been discussed several times by the planning commission, and it was thought getting everybody together to hear, just talking about it in an informal matter. No one is ready to put this thing in the ordinance. It was just to see what your thoughts on this was, even though I had not been at couple of the last planning commissions, but I knew what the thought of the planning commission was to gauge your temperature, to see what you thought about it. And what I'm hearing is the city manager is, okay, let's condense this down, let's consult with the attorneys, and let's not try to duplicate as much as possible the state law in regards to rental properties.
I guess I don't have a problem with, if the state has the law, and if we're gonna adopt this, I don't mind it also covering those areas that are in the Landlord-Tenant Act, but to use things that are in the Landlord-Tenant Act as the primary reason for adopting this is what my objection is. Do you understand?
I understand. I just don't know that law well enough in Alaska, so it would give me an opportunity also to review it, talk with, have Mr. Chandler, whoever Mr. Chandler wants to, advise us for, and then also talk to Dave a little bit tomorrow. Now that we're here, okay, we'd like to shrink this down a little bit. I mean, adopting an international property maintenance code is always going to be a controversial issue for any community, because someone is going to feel that they're being targeted, because that's just how people think.
Yeah, you should have been here when we talked about zoning.
Oh, I can only imagine. I've been in a lot of communities where I have a lot of battle scars on adopting concepts, so that were not something the community had. And, so, I mean, I don't think anybody wants to make this, staff doesn't, but we always make this a highly controversial issue, but if we can, and give Dave the tools to make things sometimes happen a little bit faster, instead of having someone in a property that is unsafe. And a lot of this usually was only focused at rental properties, just so you know.
And that's why I was suggesting.
And I know when I listened to your concerns. Anytime someone sees this, I think the city is gonna spend their time going around knocking on doors, wanting to go in and see how they're living. And normally, usually we found that when we got a call about the for the homeowner to be living in. You know, other than that, we never went in.
Right. I mean, as long as it's clear that that sort of thing isn't gonna happen. I mean, my overriding concern is, you know, a lot of people in this town are basically living paycheck to paycheck and not even that in cases. And if all of a sudden you throw this in there and can't have any paint that's chipped on the outside or inside of your house, your bathroom fans have to be functional. You have to have a vent in your kitchen. You gotta, you know, all of these things that, quite frankly, I don't have. I mean, my carpet's dirty, but it doesn't talk about that here. I've got a few non-bed bug bugs in my house, but I think everybody has house flies and whatnot. That's not covered here. But you know, I mean, standardizing lawns and those sorts of things, which, yeah, I heard you. We're taking that out, but you can't, as it was, you know, when I was reviewing it before the meeting, I was just getting more and more, you know, it's like, what, you're gonna mandate that I can't have, you know, the grasses and the vegetation in my lawn higher than X inches, and
It's not a homeowners association thing where we say that, your fence can only be
But
between
I'm-
67 and 69.
I mean, that kind of set the tone, you know, and then it was like, okay, you know, you're setting minimum standards, and the standards are up here for everybody, that everybody has to maintain their own property at this standard, when currently in town it's probably here. And so that's thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars that every property owner is gonna have to put out to bring their properties up to standard. If this was applied, you know, as written across the board, no exceptions. That's my biggest complaint.
Reality is, it wouldn't happen. People don't have money to do that.
Right, so they get fined through the nose until the city gets their house.
I'd like to see the commission come and say, what can we do to incentivize people to put all these rental properties that we're looking to involve back in the practice? What can the city do to help incentivize people?
Well, most of them just need to be taken down and rebuilt with something else.
Actually, there's a number of buildings. If you drive around town and you look, there's a lot of empty buildings that there's, why the heck is this building empty? You know, slap a new coat paint on, a couple new windows, and you know, don't know what it looks like inside, but outside of the building, the roof's good, building's good, building's empty.
Well, it probably comes down to section 602.3 on heat supply. The temperature must be a minimum of 68 degrees, and half these buildings in town, that's a windy, including, you know, some of my own, that, you know, I'm lucky if I can keep it at 60 at times of the year.
Yeah.
So, that's what a lot of it comes down to. You know, this shouldn't be, perceived, I don't think, as, we're just tossing this out. We appreciate the work that's been done on it, but, in order to move it to the next step, I think we've identified, some things that need to be, looked at, and, you know, ideally, a lot of this stuff, you know, has to be a paragraph long in order to meet the legalese of the thing, but, you know, some little flow chart and bubble chart with, you know, if you have this problem, you know, have you done, you know, have you done this, and if you've done this, then you go here. Maybe that gets too complicated too, but.
Yeah, I'd like to see it, and I didn't write down all the sections, and you were going a little faster than I was able to scroll, but you know, chop out the sections that were not, that the planning commission is not recommending. Unless there's members of the council that wanna see it adopted as original. But, you know, and then let's take another look.
Well, I think another read through of it, in a more leisurely time, because, I don't know how many can admit to spending more than about 15 minutes on this the first time through, if even that, this weekend.
And also, you know, well, I read through the whole thing too, but, you know, what other communities of similar size in Alaska have actually adopted? You know, Bethel, Bellingham, Barrow, Utqiagvik, et cetera.
We built these things at one point, and they did have a planning commissioner was met with them. And he was saying there was a big battle going on because some people had to, the residential loans had to be like this tall.
Yeah.
Commercial could be that long. And it was a battle. And
I mean, on the positive side, you know, you could look at it to say that instead of thinking that, you know, we wanna fine everybody for everything that's a flagrant violation in here, why not incentivize, you know, someone that gets a building permit, that gets improvements to their property, say, you know, we'll give you a tax break because you're making some smaller building that's just a shack into something that's nice enough that you can rent it out to somebody.
Yeah, and that's another thread that we're working on. I mean, right now it's just, you know, paint and stuff to make things pretty, not anything structural, but, yeah.
So how does this tie in with C on the agenda, which is these other codes? And I take it the other codes are here just to discuss the year of the codes that we have adopted, or is there something else?
I thought it was just a tax support.
So,
I skipped the tax for right now.
so the state of Alaska has adopted these current codes, Uniform Plumbing Code 2018, 2017, Electrical Code, International Building Code 2012, INC Code 2012, Fire Code 2012, and National Residential Code 2018. Those are the current state of Alaska adopted codes. As of our ordinance, I think, Brian, we're on 2009.
Yes.
So I don't know if we need to redo our ordinance to where it says that the city of Nome will be adopting the most current state of Alaska codes. Because right now, if you go on our website and you click the hyperlink of where it says code, it comes up with these codes. But according to our ordinance, it says we're 2009. And I went through and all these other sections here I have to do under 4 of A, B, and all that. I just made sure that the numbers in the 2012 and 2018 codes made the same numbers. Or if the numbers changed, and that's what's on those.
Now, as I recall, we had exceptions to the,
Right, that's what these are.
okay, so,
The A through U and W, and
okay.
that's all these ones right here. Page 79 and 80, I think.
You compared the difference between
The current and the old one, yes.
yeah.
That's
There
the thing
wasn't,
on page 79.
Yeah.
there's nothing that looked like it was, gonna cause major problems for us.
I guess the thing is when, when they change these, adopt a new one, there often are such minimal changes to them. But then all of a sudden, at least on the commercial side, you have to go through a whole new code review.
Yeah.
And I'm looking right now at, the $50,000 bill for having to look at the codes again, just because they adopted a new version. And I bet that the list of things that are different, is gonna result in a page this long of, a couple of little comments, and that's gonna be it.
Well, when we adopt the new ones, I don't object to adopting the new ones. Can't we make the effective date 6 months hence or something? And that way it'll cover those building under construction issues.
I guess the thing what I'm referring to is that, the state's already adopted this and fire marshal approvals and all that, so,
Right.
it is what it is. But, and these are primarily residential, or are these commercial codes too?
The building code is commercial, your national electrical code is basically commercial. Uniform plumbing code is commercial. Mechanical, all that is commercial, and fire code is commercial.
Yeah, but those, smoke, smoke detector, carbon monoxide, it's a residential.
Yes.
And frankly, it's something I really think you would want to adopt with the amount of, what do they call this fossil fuel diesel?
But I've been, everybody that's applied for a permit or whatever, they've always asked, what current code, and I tell them, the state of Alaska has adopted 2018 IRC. I got a phone call today that a guy wants to know if he can, well, take this back, the guy called me today and I didn't get a hold of him, but he left a message. It was, as of right now, the state of Alaska is IBC 2012. Does the city of Nome have a problem with me doing it as IBC 2018, because that's what the property owner or his person that he's doing this for wants him to make this building at?
Is there anything less restrictive in the 2018? I mean, or is it just?
I don't know. I
I mean,
haven't seen
there's-
that. As far as I know, all I have is 2012 upstairs.
Right.
I have the IRC 2018.
If I want to build something that's more
Restrictive?
safe, more restrictive, then
I would say there shouldn't be a problem with that. Yeah, I mean, I tried calling them back, but I got a recording, so. I was gonna say, yeah, if they want to build to
the
that.
minimum standards, right?
Yeah.
If you exceed the code and do something better, then you get penalized for that.
Right, I was looking at standards for building a deck with the loads and everything, and it calculated for my, what was it? I don't remember this. So I was gonna give you the square footage of the deck, but anyway, I forgot what that was. But it was $7,000 just for the materials, because you needed, the frame around the outside, and then you needed timbers every 16 inches, and then specially, specific density of deck boards and all of this stuff, and then the rails and all of that. So $7,000 just for the materials.
Was it above 30 inches?
No,
You don't need a rail.
right? But
Hey,
it makes it look
Save
nice.
you money.
just a technical, when we're talking about the commercial code, are you also wanting the updated version of the residential international code, 1 and 2? family
No,
code?
these are the ones I want. These are the current ones.
Okay.
This guy just called today and he has someone that wants him to design the building as 2018. The state of Alaska has not adopted the IBC 2018. This is what they've adopted.
And I guess, how, I have a little bit of a problem with just having it nebulous in that, whatever the state adopted is what we're adopting, as opposed to referencing a specific deal. When you just pointed out an issue on our website where we're linking to the wrong code, and, not necessarily on these things, but, internet is great, and a good tool for when I'm looking at something, but, if you're emailing city council from one link on another page, you probably can still go into Robert Johnson and just have the tours. So, I mean, to update and keep those things, current, I mean, I think it's better to, I mean, if we want the 2012 codes instead of the 2009, then we should strike the one and put the other one in, but, not list them as just, whatever the latest ones are.
Well, the IRC 2018, Alaska Housing Finance Corporation says you will build to IRC 2018 or you will not get their money. That's why the state of Alaska adopted 2018.
And that applies to this community as well, because they service this community with multiple loan programs, so we should keep on track.
And it's kind of like, yeah, you can drive a 30-year-old car that's got 200,000 miles on it and remember all the stuff that you got to do to drive it, but eventually, it's worth getting the new one and just dealing with new car problems. Yeah, there's going to be new car problems, but same thing with codes.
So if we're adopting a different numbered code, how many of this U to W, I guess, needs to be looked at to see, why these things were accepted in the first place? I mean, if it was just, I guess if there were, what the reason was, and is there a reason to continue to accept them?
Where were those in here?
Sections 8
On page 69.
I remember years ago, somebody went through the building codes and determined that it was just too unworkable to mandate certain standards.
With the city attorney.
Right. Yeah.
But, I mean, I guess I don't know what this thing is on S, for instance, which talks about sprinkler systems. Why there's an exception to that.
State of Alaska, I think, has an exception that residential homes don't have to have a sprinkler system on there. Maybe She-Rock and I can't remember what, is that what it was or something?
It's a recommended standard that the number of states, residential units have sprinkler systems.
Yeah, they get a new car. That's said before.
Putting a sprinkler system in a house is weird.
Right. So, I mean, but what is what was the original? I mean, this is what it was changed to, but maybe the original applied to more types of structures than
I
this.
don't know that. That's, it's talking about occupancy load and hours of use of a building.
Daycare uses that are licensed to care for more than.
That's a group E, which is educational. It's like your schools and stuff.
Yeah. So this just says the only types of buildings that are required to have the sprinkler systems or education buildings. Okay. Others need different types of sprinklers.
Well, it just seems that if we're changing it from 2012 to 2018, we need to see.
I already went through and found that out. That's what these second ones are. Where it says 101.3.1, I put IBC same, and need to remove E from
Oh, okay.
amendments.
All right, I see.
113 IBC, 113 IRCR, 1112 is new.
Okay, so we need to look at,
So some numbers have changed. I would probably say 60% are gonna be the same. And some numbers are gonna be different.
yeah, I guess again, you know, 10 years ago, maybe there was a reason for these exceptions. Maybe there might still be, but they really are. Yeah, New Zealand's, same. Okay, so the other thing we had then was, were there other comments with regard to the ordinance section 5 that's in the packet? Other things to bring up on that? Nope.
Do you want more straw?
No. So we can put that aside now, and then go back to page 68. This, can you explain what the question is?
So recently it came up that we grant tax exemption for projects and any materials and services that are consumed in a project for building and remodel permits is what we do it in practice. This, when I re-examine the code, the code specifically says building permits. It doesn't say remodel permits. And at the same time, we've had people asking me, well, mechanical electrical is also a pretty significant project, and why does that not have tax exemption as well? And I can understand a little bit of the excavation, fill, demo. I mean, demo we don't even charge for. Demo is just based on how much they bring to the dump. But I had no good answer for why mechanical electrical wasn't in there. And upon reviewing the code, finding out that we grant tax exemption to remodel permits when remodel permits are not named in the code. Seems like a pretty good time for the council to give clarification on what direction they would like to see.
For all of these facilities, fixing the buildings that we're talking about.
Our fees for permits is set basically just to cover costs, correct?
It's set on the value for building and remodel, it's set on the value of construction for mechanical electrical, it's a flat $75. Move is a flat $25. Excavation and fill is a flat $25, which doesn't even come close to covering costs. And with excavation and fill, we get fees involved, and that's $50, $60 just for them to touch it.
Remodel with just a regular building, and that seems pretty straightforward in my opinion. Everybody else agree with that? I guess mechanical and electrical, do we want to exempt from tax the 200 or the $1,000 meter base upgrade versus the $150,000 redo? Well, they probably qualify under a state, get exempt under a state thing, but it seems like there's some commercial things that,
Some big commercial ones.
What do you,
I think we should cover all exemptions completely. Charge sales tax, no senior exemptions, no exemptions period.
It'll make life a lot easier behind the desk.
Lower it all a percent.
Exactly. Get rid of all of that and drop it down a bunch.
I think it provides incentive to fix the buildings and keep commerce local, keeps, filling excavation or local, keeps local businesses incentivized. You know, just have a blanket exemption, while they have the permit or whatever, forever period it goes for, 30 days, whatever they are, whichever, they might have a time frame on those ones, put a time frame on the tax exemption on those particular permits, so it doesn't run on and on like the other ones.
Yeah.
Up to 2 years.
Yeah, so we do have a conversation with, between Dave, John Blees and I, permits for fill. Some folks were trying to get permits for fills, like, well, I got one last year, so if it was for 2 years, I can just.
I think you should put a time limit.
That would be basically the direction they should do every year.
Told by John that it should be a seasonal thing. Your fill permit's good for that one season.
That makes perfect
You
sense.
know, apply again
If you're
for
building season.
what he suggests.
And also regarding not naming any names, I've recently become a little bit more involved in looking at sales tax exemption returns, and I'm finding that some businesses are, there's no permit number, but they've just been putting in fill permit tax exemption. So, and we haven't been pushing back on that, to my knowledge.
I mean, it's just for the material that's actually required, it's the fill, right?
Material and services.
And services that are required for the fill, it's not, they're not
Excavation.
getting their groceries tax exempt because they got a permit.
I hope not.
They're gonna spend that tax exempt money in the grocery store.
Well, I guess maybe one of the things that I'm thinking about just on, you know, not wanting the big guys to escape on this, but okay for the little guys, just putting a cap on it, that, but then again, I guess I'm keeping track of that.
On the permit application. Yeah, on the permit application, then you would have to cycle that out to the businesses that look at those permits, but then permits can be kind of political. Some folks really don't like permits, fill permits. Dave and I get a lot of pushback on them. And some people don't even look at the tax exempt list, they just take people's word for it.
I think some people don't realize that fill permits are needed, like, you know, to put a load of gravel on your parking lot.
And we did have somebody who was building for the last few years, didn't realize that there was tax exemption, and they never said anything at the local supply houses. And so now they're coming back 2 years later asking for refunds.
So what's the overlying rationale, justification, incentive? Why would someone give a tax exemption for materials and labor that goes into a building project?
Because you had a building permit, you were paying building permit fee.
But that's to cover your inspections and those kind of things. The only thing I was thinking of is you know, it incentivizes getting the permit, which opens the door for then the building inspector to do their job and to make sure that things are built to code. And once it's constructed, then you're getting property tax for the next 40 years. So I'm not sure that those rationale, that rationale works for the other permits. I mean, for a remodel permit, sure, it does. I mean, that enhances the value. It's going to increase your property value and therefore your taxes going forward. It's kind of the double taxation thing. You're paying tax to do it, and then you're going to get taxed on it for the rest of the life of the structure.
I believe the state makes their like driveway permits and stuff seasonal.
That would make sense. I mean, we don't need road projects, which is essentially a fill permit, right? Going on for 6 years.
So how much, if any, of this stuff is, just, permit after permit? I guess, why, whatever mechanical, electrical thing, that would be part of a building or remodel. I guess you could say they're only addressing the mechanical, electrical, so they're not remodeling the building. Well, they're remodeling the electric and the mechanical.
Good question, and I can't quite answer it.
When the
I
Nestle,
don't know, that permit's been there since I've been there.
when the Nestle put in the generator, it was only for the generator.
Is it a
Didn't
different?
require a remodel.
Basically, I think that permit was put in there so you're having licensed people put the stuff in.
Yeah.
Like if someone's working on a meter base, you make sure that person's an electrician. You have someone changing out a boiler and or working on a water and sewer type of stuff, you wanna have a plumber.
But can't residential people do what they want inside their place?
Homeowner can, yeah, it never loses that right. But,
That's a chance you take though. I mean,
people going out or hanging a shingle, you wanna know it, you have some record of it. Homeowner has the right
Right,
to.
so right now, if I'm gonna do some work in my house, and it involves some plumbing reroutes and some electrical, replacing lights, and the wiring back to junction boxes and that kind of stuff, which I did by myself without a permit. So that's all. And I'm also, which I haven't done, well, counters and that kind of stuff isn't required for a permit, but moving a couple of walls or whatever. So then do I need 2 permits, a remodel permit and a electrical and plumbing?
You're not gonna transfer the
no remodel.
The mechanical
So-
is just for a specific.
Remodel and then do that stuff.
So,
As long as you,
The electrical and mechanical is included in a remodel permit?
if you
But-
were remodeling your thing, you could
Okay.
throw that in there.
Alright,
So
So
mechanical,
you're kind of better off getting a remodel permit.
is it a different fee structure?
One's a flat one, and one's a,
The electrical is a flat fee?
$75.
Okay.
Model is a structure.
But that $75 mechanical, electrical, you pay taxes on.
So, all that stuff Carol Piscoya is doing next to her house, so they got a $75 permit.
Yeah, did they?
No, I got a building permit. They're putting up towers, I call them towers.
No, I'm not talking about this way, I'm talking about this
No,
way.
both, I call those towers,
Oh,
even though
okay.
they fund their towers, that's how I look at it. And they got a building permit.
Okay.
I can't remember how much it was, I think we got probably around 6-7. I'll have to check that
Still,
out.
it wasn't a
My
$75.
GCI was
GCI did something
50,000.
like that
I
too.
don't know how that one was. I don't have it memorized.
Okay, I guess that was just when you said it was $75 for it.
No, not for that one. That one, I made him get a building permit. He's kinda iffy.
So, what's the sense on, including the, all of these or the top 3, or are we doing away with exemptions altogether?
or nothing.
I think we should incentivize people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you pay $75 for your permit, and then all of your $6,000 in materials is tax exempt, so that would have been a really good incentive for me to get a permit, actually.
A $5,000 valuation is $111.25, so maybe,
Well, on a electrical and plumbing permit is what I'm, mechanical.
right, but I mean, I'm just saying, so you're saying 6,000, we're only charging 75, but a $5,000 valuation, since I have this memorized, is $111.25.
But you're not going by actual.
Right, that's just an
Yeah.
evaluation. So if you were to get $6 worth of merchandise and pay 5%, you're gonna pay 300 in taxes. You're still saving money
Yeah,
by getting that permit.
right.
So I don't know, maybe wanna raise that permit price a little bit. Cause usually if you're changing out a boiler and stuff, you're gonna probably be spending 5 or 6. I had to usually come and redo my plumbing and my heating boiler and fix up my water heater and stuff. I don't know why I bought a house, but it's gonna probably cost me $5,000. But I have a remodel permit because I ordered.
I had a building inspector go over and take a look at it before he.
Yeah. It looks a lot better than what it was, so. I got my garden hose caps on and everything.
Okay, we got 6 more minutes here, 5 more minutes. Anything else on the planning commission's mind while you're here?
I'd like to pursue what Mark wrote up earlier, given construction and moving. That way stuff work together in the future type thing. Stimulate some housing.
There's a lot of stuff on the internet about community development and ways that communities get involved with, there's a lot of. And we just had a, I'm not sure about the moment, but we just had an article and we mentioned in the post office.
It's crazy, right?
We have a lot of properties that could be incentivized to fix up and do that.
Carrot works better than the stick, is that your thinking? I think I had proposed once with decrepit buildings, lots, et cetera, you got property tax to double the rate. But that went over like a lead balloon.
Besides the general beautification, there's also a question that we had answered a little bit for us in the survey about what direction should the town be looking at in terms of development. So Front Street apparently is in regardless of the challenges we face. And so one of the things I noted in our historical surveys documentation was a very nice description of various architectural styles, such that if we were to go a step beyond beautification and wanna put together a package that would incentivize business owners to develop a particular architectural theme in a particular zone, I now see where we can pull all the information from to make sort of a cogent stab at trying that if folks are interested. And then I started to argue with Greg about a homeowner can do whatever he wants to inside of his own home. Well, if you lower your home below the floodplain standards, you might get
Inside your house.
inside your house after it's built. At what point do you lose your city's certificate of habitation?
All right, well, thank you all for, I think this has been fruitful. And, all right, couple minute break here. Such a stingy.
This is what, this. Every morning.
Yes. That's why I was getting it at 5 o'clock in the morning. No, I think it was 2 hours. And after yeah, you're supposed to do it during the day when everybody's at work. Yeah, so the first day we ran.
Check your social media.
Oh, I know, but it's like, yeah, it's probably that. No sooner do I not go in and then hear someone broken a window or something in there. So then after that, it was. You go buy me a beer with that money, make the call out and see. I didn't get paid yet, it's on this paycheck. I gotta pay Winkle in that. Man. Basically, I looked at them today, this is boiler one, the one that you were there. Now, well, I consider the one closest to the wall between you, because that's where the manifold is, and it goes right, yeah. But number two is the one that's damaged. Generally, which is boiler one, that's what I think the majority is, because that's, it just comes and feeds back. So, me and Winkleman tightened that couple things. He heated up and something leaking. So I call in there. So I've been checking it every morning. Doing good. Thinking maybe taking a section off at once. Taking that one section out. So, but you gotta pull the motor down. You take both motors apart. Yeah. Just look along on this one, there's totally nothing out.
You're in learning mode tonight? Well, we lost a couple of folks, otherwise this almost looks like it could beat the record. Yeah. Yeah, I know, that's actually dangerous. Short agenda is usually a long meeting.
Do that when we first started.
Brian, looks like it. I know. Looking at the tenant remedies in the landlord-tenant law. If the landlord does not meet his or her responsibility, the law provides for remedies. Number one remedy is the tenant may move.
There's a rent offset, I think.
Yeah, there's a rent offset. You can fix it yourself and then offset your rent.
Do we have everybody? Yeah, I guess we do. Huh? Hey Doug, are you unavailable? Looks like yes. Great, thank you. All right, it's 7:04 and call the regular meeting of the Nome County Council for Monday, July 12th, 2021 to order. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll to establish a quorum?
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Martinson. Councilmember Reader is excused. Councilmember Topcock is excused. Youth Representative Ogalisa. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to the approval of agenda. We have the agenda before us here. I'm not aware of any changes. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
Make a motion to adopt the agenda as
Second.
Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Martinson. Any changes? Anybody else? Roll call, please, on the adoption of, or the approval of the agenda.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to approval of minutes, June 28, 2021, regular meeting. Is there a motion to adopt these minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of June 28, 2021.
Thank you, Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Martinson. Any corrections, changes other than ministerial? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on then to communications, we have a letter from a Randall Smith with regard to a tax issue. Mr. Clerk, do you have any comments on this?
Yes, so Mr. Smith he's been coming in and speaking to both Clearly and I over the past 2 or so weeks. He says that he moved it out of Nome, and I gave him the normal spiel that nobody likes to hear, but it doesn't, you have to tell us. And if you don't appeal it, then it gets locked into the tax roll. He says that he did so sometime post 2015, like either at the end of 2015 or 2016, and we have no record of it. I can't find any record that would corroborate his claims. We do have something that was turned in December of 2018, and he has since been taken off the tax roll. But for tax years 2015, 2016, and 2017, he is still accumulating penalty and interest on those.
Can you tell us what the original tax was on that?
Not here, about $100. I think his current bill is maybe 138 or 140.
I was gonna ask if the port has records of, because they charge fees, right?
Yeah.
But for $100 and some bucks, I don't know that that's even.
I can see if I can corroborate the story with the port as well.
Unless evidence to the contrary can be located, doesn't seem like this gentleman's going to pay any bother to write to us. So is there interest in considering this debt closed?
I'd make a motion to waive the penalties and fees. Did he pay the tax? No, the tax penalties and fees in question.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Doug Johnson. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us on to citizens' comments. Are there members this evening in the public that would like to address council? Seeing everybody shake their head no. We will move on to planning and zoning. We have May 4th regular meeting minutes and regular rescheduled minutes of June 22nd. And just to note that the planning commission was present for a work session prior to this, and we appreciate them taking the time to come and dialogue with us and came up with some plans and future discussions. That brings us down to new business. The first item, what you read by title?
R 210702, a resolution authorizing the city manager to take necessary steps to make emergency repairs to recreation center boiler system.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 210702?
So move.
Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Doug Johnson. Discussion, Mr. Manager.
Okay, I received a call, I think it was Tuesday of last week, discussing, telling that there had been a Lysol leak discovered as part of our daily checks up in that area. The main boiler up there is leaking. We're also having trouble with the auxiliary, but that seems to have cured itself. Obviously, just so everybody knows that the issue of the boilers was discussed as early as 2008, 2009 in a recreation center study, and was discussed with you all in the last year. So the situation that we're finding is that right now the best we may be able to do is just to try to figure out how to repair it, because the chance of getting a new boiler up here at the very earliest would be 6 months. Now that boiler, as you can imagine, basically keeps the building warm, and it is our emergency shelter. So when we drafted this resolution, we were not really sure how much it would cost us to even replace it. And we've seen numbers now as high as possibly $300,000 or $400,000 just for the cost of the boiler, and not including the removal of asbestos materials which are in the boiler. So we talked with an Adam Wilson today from one of the engineering firms that we also use to give us some understanding, and he was giving us the bad news that we're going to have to try to figure out how to repair it, which we think there is a way. But Dave and I and Chip were up there today, and Dave was on the ground taking photos of certain portions of the equipment to see if the repairs that can be even attempted can be done. So Dave, do you want to add any good news to what I'm saying or any clarification?
I think the main thing is going to be a lot of labor. The parts are probably going to be cheap, but depending on when we get those parts, don't know when we can get a cast iron. Well, this was the plan from Adam today, was maybe we can take a section out of because the auxiliary boiler has 5 sections. The main one has 4. So if we can take one of the sections out of the auxiliary, put it in the main one, that would have 2 boilers and have 4 sections.
I don't know.
Is that realistic?
You gotta shut down both boilers.
Yeah.
And you got to see if you can get those valves and those pipes off those boilers. And the glycol in that system is shot.
I mean, do you or those boilers? Do you know?
Actually, I saw that information.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was.
It's substantial.
Most of it's going to be labor intensive. And moving one section from one to the other is going to be kind of hard, because you're going to have to get piping, because the pipes go right out the back of the boiler. So you got to move those so you can take off the section and then put the sections back on. But if you're going to change the gaskets and the O-rings, you might as well change them in all of them
taking it apart. Is there a different kind of boiler?
Yes,
They're both the same type of boiler.
well, we're talking about another type of boiler.
Oh.
That would probably take the same amount of time because it was a steel material. And these, so, we had hoped when we were first discussing this before we, over the past week was that, maybe we could go out and get a new boiler. It now seems that's impossible. So now we want the authority to do repairs and get it done. And if we need to hire this firm, that they can come in and do it for us, give us the direction that we need as an emergency, and then we'll just go put the whole thing out to bid and address following the proper bid procedures, doing it and really.
Yeah, I was just narrowing my eyes because that's going to lengthen the period, of course, that it takes. But
Well, when you're,
But
at
there is
this
a
point,
procedure.
this is not an emergency because he's
Right.
recommending, we can't get something for 6 months.
yeah,
That is no longer, in my opinion, an emergency. Now we're looking at trying to get the thing fixed, make sure it can stay functional, especially through the winter, and then have something go out to bid, late this winter for new installation in the spring.
I guess the other thing was leave that one there. Make this one down to a 3-section maybe, not a,
oh,
but
Yeah,
I'll
'cause-
talk with Adam.
yeah. The other thing I was wondering is what's how much of a risk is there that when you take apart the one that's working, that all of a sudden it's not going to work anymore? I mean, that something's going to happen that's it's going to break.
The unknown. They're 40 years old, yeah, I mean,
Then
they
you've
were
got
put
nothing.
in there in 84,
Right.
and they have been taken apart twice as far as I know. 98,
Okay.
and I think my brother said he helped take them all apart and put new gaskets and stuff.
So making it a
That's been
3-section.
done, though. I mean, it's not 40 years of not getting taken apart, so that's.
Right. So making it a 3-section, that way you don't have to touch the other one, right?
Right, exactly.
But what does that do to the?
That's something I'm gonna have
capability?
to ask Adam. I mean,
We discussed, this is a new option, we discussed other options with him
yeah.
earlier today, and
But I was just thinking, if we don't touch that one, I mean, because it's gonna be so much work to take a section out of that one and put in this one. So that means you gotta take all the piping that's on the back of those boilers out, get rid of them.
And then this is gonna sound like a really stupid question, but there's no way to like weld a patch on or something, right?
No, I don't think on cast iron.
No. Okay.
Well, I'm sure manager will, as things progress, if they change and it becomes more down the line of an emergency, that can be addressed and he'll let us know.
well, this is gonna give us, I don't know if this needs to be amended, but it's gonna give us we're not looking at putting a new, we're looking at fixing the existing boiler.
So it's to make emergency repairs to the recreational center boiler system.
Yeah, I don't know that we need to amend it and the discussion is clear that
So it's up to
we can't freeze up the building. Councilmember Doug Johnson, do you have any comments or input here?
Council member, actually, your ARPA money would probably be, this is what the intent was, to give cities and towns this type of money to do some safety repairs, and this is obviously a safety repair issue.
Okay, well, we can figure out where it's coming from later.
Yeah.
If there's not further than a roll call, please, on the adoption of resolution 210702.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us down to utility manager's report. Mr. Morgan.
Good evening. Ken Morton on behalf of NGU. So the PCE program was not funded at the end of last year, or last month's legislative session. So backing up here, everybody's familiar with the PCE. It's a program that helps subsidize the cost of electricity in rural Alaska, so it matches up more with Fairbanks, Juneau, and Bainbridge. This year, last year, with the lower price of fuel, it's somewhere a little over 7.4 cents per kilowatt hour. A couple of years ago, when the fuel was pricey, closer to 11 cents per kilowatt hour. It applies to the first 500 kilowatt hours of residential bills, and also applies to some of the community buildings.
That's $35.
37.
$37.
Right.
Order of magnitude, I suppose.
Right, $37.
Okay.
Last year was $57
Per month.
per month. That's for folks that consume the full 500 kilowatt hours per month. Quite a few folks actually do not. So what that means to us is, looking at last year's numbers, we got $59,000 in July, $44,000 for residential assistance, and $15K that would reimburse for city costs, utility costs of power. The legislators meet in special session on August 2nd, and I'm sure there will be some lobbying efforts, any different directions on this. So the last couple of weeks, we've been having some outages, 5 to 7 a.m. Monday through Friday. It's to help the crews more safely and expeditiously work on repairs to the system. This is a cross arm that was at 5th and Stedman by the Wilson. A failed cutout that was pretty well fused. We could have lost the top of the pole. Here's an insulator that looks like marshmallows. It didn't used to look like that. That's some of what they were working on, and it's time well spent. A new lineman apprentice that started today, a young man named Joshua Taylor. He's pretty new to know. On the water sewer department, the Bering Street project continues to go well. Contractor should have parts south of Sepulveda done by early next week, and then we'll shift to the next section between Sepulveda. Any questions on this or anything else?
Your power outages plan where there's metals repairs done and there are further ones, or there's plans for further ones?
We're substantially done with City 1 and City 2. We might do a couple on the FAA feeder. Maybe a separate media campaign, just targeted for those folks. Nothing as big as what happened on City 1 and City 2.
Bering's going well.
Bering's going very well.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to city manager's report. Activity report at page 104. The quarterly departmental reports for April and June are included in the packet, as well as monofill and landfill quantity calculations. Mr. Manager.
You have my report in front of you. Unfortunately, this past week, we had 3 individuals who were dead on arrival that the ambulance department had to work with those circumstances. We are at 30 sexual assaults for the year. Hopefully that number will not keep rising. And as of today, even taking into consideration the people that have suffered COVID and have some immunity, there is approximately 72% of our community that has some level of vaccination. And 70%, 71% are fully vaccinated.
We're not meeting the flight anymore.
We're not meeting the flight to the hospital. In fact, I came up on the flight yesterday. The flight, they have someone in the terminal. The airline is short personnel, so they don't want to assist on that, and I can understand that. The young lady that met me really only asked the question, was I going to Kotzebue or was I going to Nome? Not suggesting that if you wanted to be tested, testing was still available, so to consider it on the ride up. When I got tested, because I was in an area where the Delta variant is very active right now. So.
Great, questions for the city manager?
Softball fields.
Softball fields. We are waiting to put the fencing in, but we did, and I wish Chip was here for this. He's still waiting for his plumber.
Yeah.
We have had very little response out of the youth wanting to play softball or playing that sport. We haven't been able to field enough to have enough teams to play against each other. But, we still want to make sure that the softball fields are up. We're looking at getting a new driver to drive the poles in the ground, which would save us at least one man from having to assist what is now a 3-person job, and we would get our rate of return back in probably a year by buying this piece of equipment. And it would put the poles in a little bit better.
Interest if the field's done too.
Aye. Councilmember Martinson, I do not disagree with you.
If you build it, they'll come.
Yeah, that's right. That's why.
Okay, further questions to the city manager can come under council member comments, if you don't mind. Citizens' comments. Anybody wish to address the council now?
This chance.
Well, you can ask him. You can ask him.
You don't hear from me.
Okay, we don't have any council member, citizens' comments, so we'll move on to council member comments. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Brown.
I've talked enough.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
I was gonna ask saunas.
Saunas are open finally. They were supposed to open up a few days earlier, but they finally got them open.
Thank you. And then also, are we fully staffed in the road crew that are out making our roads less potholed?
Well, we are fully staffed, but and in fairness, if you talk to the staff, they will tell you you are not fully staffed because a decision was made a few years back to eliminate a position. So because I heard that same question and I said, no, you're fully staffed. You have all the positions. No, we're not fully staffed because I met with the road crew just the other day and to see what any concerns that they have. So the maintenance, we're down one position because we finally have gotten all the companies to submit one company agreed to submit a bid, 2 other companies decided they did not want the custodial work, so he was looking at offering.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
Councilmember Martinson.
Nothing further.
That's not fair.
Okay, moving on to council or mayor's comments then. I want to thank Brian and the city clerk's office for their efforts for 4th of July and the games, and we had a nice little turnout on Front Street for it, despite it being a little bit rainy and in the middle of a weekend on a Sunday. But those that were there had a good time, and thank you for that. Also,
would be remiss if not thanking the fire department for their annual ice cream social, as it was on the program, and the raffles that they have. So that there were lots of folks participating in that. And also want to thank them for washing off the streets here a couple of weeks ago. It definitely helps to get some of the track down dust from town off of Front Street. The saunas got mentioned, had the different, several people concerned about the saunas, and they are pleased that they're running again. Also, just want to encourage folks that still might be on the fence on vaccinations to consider that again. It was amazing to hear this last week. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I pretty much spent in bed with an upper respiratory infection. The first time in 2 years after having worn a mask all the time. And so it did, I think, have benefits other than preventing COVID. I forgot how miserable that was. So got a couple of strange looks when I wore a mask in the bank today and a couple other places, but I'm still going to try to, at least for the dust even, keep going. I would like to have you reconfirm Derek McCarty to seat G on the Planning Commission. Pardon me, on the Port Commission.
Do you have to make a motion to do that?
Yeah, to concur with the appointment.
Make a motion to concur on the appointment of Darren McCarty to the reseat on the Port Commission.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Brown. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And message from the Port Director that the Port Commission is having an open house on Thursday at Old St. Joe's from 4 to 6:30 on the Port and Harbor expansion projects with the Corps of Engineers. So the public is invited to that again Thursday, Old St. Joe's, 4 to 6:30. Thank you, Joy, for that. And at this point, I'd ask for a motion to recess into executive session for discussions on legal strategies, the immediate knowledge of which may have an adverse impact on city finances.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Martinson, roll call, please.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Member Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
We will have legal counsel involved and also the city clerk and the city manager. We are in recess. The time is 7:32.
Diddling around, Dave. Get out of here.